You're a coach with the Jets, but if you had to profile their offense, and we have Steve, who's a draft professor for the Jets, in the chat. But Owen, what's your assessment of the Jets with what little we know with the new coaching staff?
So I always keep in touch with the local division rivals here with the Bills, including the New Jersey Jets there, and so they brought in with this. They have their Lions coaching staff coming over. They have names escaping me. Head coach
Aaron Glenn.
Aaron Glenn, thank you. They have him coming in. I can remember this name for some reason, but they brought in Tanner Engstrand, who was the kind of like heir apparent to Ben Johnson and the Lions, who potentially was going to be their offensive coordinator whenever he took a job. He ended up taking an offensive coordinator position now with the Jets. So I'm expecting a lot of similar stuff, maybe not the level of play calling Ben Johnson has or acumen he has there, but similar styles of offense, having both their head coach and now their new offensive coordinator come from that same tree of coaching and having run that same kind of offense. And you kind of saw that with their first draft class. So you have the Jets going through, they already have kind of their number one guy in Garrett Wilson, kind of matching up with Amon-Ra St. Brown there. But they want to pair him up with a more athletic tight end, someone who can, when you're running some of these deeper digs, you have a threat out of the tight end position, a la Sam Laporta with the Lions, who is taking those underneath drags and pulling the attention underneath and open up the back behind over the middle of the field shots to a guy like Garrett Wilson. So you have that with when they drafted Mason Taylor in the second round. Jeremy Ruckett's more of their typical, run blocking, hasn't really proven much there. And then they're investing in that offensive line where now you're having guys who are maulers in the run game when it comes to Joe Tippmann, Elijah Vera Tucker, John Simpson, and you have some more athletic tackles like Armand Membu and Olu Fashanu, kind of reflective of what they have with Frank Ragnow over in Detroit. You had your athletic tackles and Penei Sewell, who was going out for passes and stuff in that Detroit offense. Like, you have guys who can move at tackle, and then you have some real ass kickers in the middle there at guard and center. So, and then you can also reflect that more so with, even though these weren't additions from the offensive coaching staff taking over, but the running back room they have Breece Hall, who has some dynamic athleticism, can be more of that Jahmyr Gibbs type. And then you have Braylon Allen, this big 6 foot, 220-pound plus running back who could be your bruising in between the tackles, Dave Montgomery stuff. So they have the archetypes there. Even if you look at like some of their depth receiver options, like they have an Alan Lazard who can take on the role of Tim Patrick had in that offense for the Lions last year. They don't have a ton of super good like depth receivers. Like they have Arian Smith, who could be their Jameson Williams because he's super fast, but he struggles with catching. Alan Lazard's not the best player when it comes to being a starting receiver for your offense, but you can see how they're trying to build the pieces there as an offense. Were molded in the form of what a Ben Johnson offense was with the Lions. The one piece they have strayed away from with that, though, has been that all of the quarterbacks they have invested on in that room right now, outside of undrafted free agent Brady Cook, because it's his shot, get another arm to throw in practice. But they have Justin Fields, who can weaponize his legs, Tyrod Taylor, who has always been known as a running quarterback, and then they signed Adrian Martinez, who was using his legs to run all over the UFL this past season. So they're all investments they've made in the quarterback position, again, excluding Brady Cook, have been guys who are going to be able to use their legs on top of executing this offense the way they did kind of with the Lions when it comes to archetypes of players they run. So you have a team that's looking to maybe stray towards a little more towards the running game, or incorporating that running from the quarterback and getting that quarterback run element implemented a little bit more. But they are kind of having the skeleton crew of what the Lions were doing there and trying to replicate what they had success with when it comes to what kind of players they're putting out there on the field for offense, at least early on in this regime's stay there.
So, Parker, what was your assessment of Armand Membu, and what type of schemes do you think he was best suited for?
Yeah, no, I mean, the reason Membu climbed up my board so high toward the end of the process was just, as I finished his evaluation, I didn't think he was as scheme specific as people made him sound. Like, people made it sound like Membu was only going to work in a wide zone scheme because he had that athleticism. And I think that athleticism, I mean, obviously would have been awesome in a scheme like that. But I think his ability to just get out in space and play, but also to be a mauler, like a vertical D-line displacement blocker, like I think it's a very underrated part of his game. I said that, while I was evaluating him throughout the process, he's got great play strength. Not only is he athletic, but he's got great play strength. He's able to use his arms and hands very well to out leverage defenders. He's able to get underneath guys and again just displace guys off the line of scrimmage and really redictate where that is. And I just an overall good offensive lineman. So I wouldn't really thrown him into any scheme specifically, but I think he's going to look awesome in what I hope is going to be a very, stretch the field horizontally in the run game type of offense, where you're going to see some wide zone, but you're also going to see some pin and pull. You're going to see some screen game, and I think we're going to see Membu out in space a lot. And I'm personally super excited to watch it.
Cool. And then, I guess from let's say a passing game, if we were to look at the Jets and what we think they're going to be. So, and I think you were the first one I heard comp Arian Smith to Jamison Williams.
Purely the speed. I'm just trying to like make that whole analogy. Like I think it starts and ends with Garrett Wilson and Mason Taylor, but I was trying to just pull names and try to find players that I knew they had on the lines there. They also brought in Josh Reynolds, who's a former Lion, so I could have went that direction, but yeah, it was just Arian Smith jumped out to me as speed guy. They had a speed guy for the Lions. James Williams, infinitely better player than Arian Smith, in my opinion. But I do think that was like they have to have that speed element on the outside that they also had in Detroit.
Yeah, so I'm also like the Schitt's Creek moderator of Draft Podcast. I will correlate two things together if I can, just to make people laugh. So I'm glad that got a smile out of you. Okay, so I guess the next Jets question. Granted, it's a new coaching staff, but if we look back 2 drafts ago, Parker, what did you think of Malachi Corley?
See, I love Malachi Corley as a college football player, like watching him in season and then getting into that film. I mean, just the explosive potential that he had and what felt like such great field vision, and just like I was excited to see him give it a shot as a returner. Like I just felt like if you could get the ball in his hands and get him in the open field, you're going to have some really exciting moments. And it just feels like it hasn't really been like that, so far in his NFL career. Obviously hasn't been too long yet. Let him settle in a little bit, but he's had some interesting moments for sure. But I'm excited to see him really catch his stride, hopefully soon.
And Owen, what do you think?
So in that draft class, I think I could safely say this, a certified Malachi Corley hater. So for me, I also saw, like you said, you can't argue with what Parker said. Like there's explosiveness. He had the build and the impact of a running back in the passing game, where if he got on screens, short slants, hitches, he was able to get upfield and he could make guys bounce off his thick lower body. He looked like a running back in space, very Deebo Samuel-esque. But where I very much pulled back on it was, yes, he's going to do well as maybe a kick returner or in the screen game or designed gimmick touches role. But for me, I didn't see an element of his game where he was going to be a smooth transition to being able to play the rest of the game as a receiver. Like if he was going to come into the game, especially early on in his career, which we've kind of seen, he was going to struggle as a typical, even like a slot receiver. He was going to be a slot. And the problem I had with him was his routes weren't totally refined. And he was a player that, even though he was super physical and aggressive with the ball in his hands, he would truck guys would just fall off of him, trying to tackle him. When he was in route or coming off the line of scrimmage, he would get bullied. I think it was Denzel Burke in a game against Western Kentucky when I was watching him shade Corley in the slot. Absolutely ate his lunch. Like could not. And Denzel Burke wasn't a great corner prospect. Like he had some hype, but I wouldn't describe him as someone who you think is going to be this mean mugging, like press man corner. And even to this point, he hasn't really been a great NFL corner. So like he was getting absolutely demolished in the open space, and he could not get separation just because he couldn't deal with the physicality at the point of the route break. So for me, it was this dichotomy of, okay, he's not, it's kind of how I felt with Savion Williams this year. A guy who, if you get the ball in his hands and he's working upfield, you can see the potential there. But like that's such a limited and niche role in an offense. And especially for Corley's case, what was working against him was having Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. Like that was a quarterback that wants to have like synergy and chemistry and wants his type of guys, he's not going to just feed this kid the ball because that's what he needs to do. Like, he wants to get the ball to his guys how he wants it, and not really have to worry about incorporating other guys. He's got to fit my system. I'm not trying to bend my system to fit him in. So he might have some upside with his new system, especially with a quarterback, Justin Fields, who respectfully is like a one read and go quarterback, even to this point in his career. But like, so that's a bad thing in a lot of cases. But in the case of looking at like a guy like Malachi Corley, you have an offense that's going to be limited in what kind of reads they're going to be throwing on his plate right away. At least you're going to have a player that excels with just getting gimmick touches, and if you can marry those two things together, where you're having Justin Fields not to think about where he's going the ball, just get it to Corley in space, he might see a better uptick in his offense because of the limitations of the quarterback as opposed to what they have with Aaron Rodgers. And it fits more so, like I said, like I don't think he's a true like wide receiver.
So Parker, Arian Smith, Malachi Corley, who gets more touches from offense this year for the Jets?
The way that I hope this offense goes, I hope it's Malachi Corley, because like I said, I'm hoping it's a horizontal run game where you're really making this defense go sideline to sideline. And that's going to open up a lot of your quick game stuff, which is what I think their quarterback room is going to need a lot of, especially early on. It's going to be quick game, trying to get the guys into space early on and let them get yak, and then it's going to be checking it down to tight ends and running backs. It should be, at least. And so in a system like that, you hope to see, honestly, just Garrett Wilson and Malachi Corley picking on, slot defenders for a majority of the, first couple months of the season.
Cool. And Owen, can we flip to the Jets defense?
Of course. I've slandered their offense enough at this point. We can start taking down the defense too. Okay, I'm not trying to
eat for everybody.
I think the offense is promising, especially with their running game, their backs, and having the quarterback multiplier. There's going to be, and I think because Justin Fields is their quarterback, and they're going to have that more athletic tight end and Mason Taylor, he's gonna pop off more so than either of the guys you mentioned with Smith or Corley. So I think there's pieces of that offense that I do like, and I do like their offensive play caller. Garrett Wilson obviously is a stud. So I think their offense will be fine. I think it'll be like league average at best. But I do think that they have some room to grow there. The defense, though, after taking a step back, we'll get to that in a second.
This defense has so much talent that I just don't want them to waste. You know what I mean? Like, they have so many guys out there that you want to just let them open up and run around, but then you're always putting them in just disadvantageous situations, whether it's game script or it's situational football. This defense never really gets to get out there and show what they can be. You see flashes of it from time to time, and obviously they have holes. No defense is perfect. But they have like some good building blocks that I hope can just turn into foundational pieces for them, and they can keep around. And obviously we'll see how it looks, in a post-Saleh era. I know those are a lot of his guys in there. But I was a huge fan of Aaron Glenn. He's one of my favorite, options in this last head coach hiring cycle. So I'm pumped to see what he's able to do with this group, personally.
Yeah, I think a lot of what the defense hinged on last year was that Quinnen Williams was a one-man show until Will McDonald kind of stepped up later in the season. And I'm still kind of concerned about, like, they're getting Jermaine Johnson back. Will McDonald now maybe could parlay it into a full season off the edge. But for me, bringing Derek Nottie and having some of these other guys who are depth D tackles, even if they don't rotate it, as Steve's saying in the comments there with their D line rotations, I don't know if they're taking enough pressure in the interior off of Quinnen Williams. Now they do have some good backers, and those guys will play a ton. This team's gonna play 4-2, probably more 4-3 defense, and they'll stick to it. Even when the Detroit Lions suffered just pandemic levels of injuries to their defense last year, they didn't get out of that. They just kept signing dudes off the street to then play linebacker for them so they could stay in that 4-3 system. So they're going to play that system. They're going to want to play. And I'm worried that the pieces they have there aren't going to be conducive to helping Quinnen Williams, which is really going to be the focal point of the defense and how they can be good. I do think the rest of the pieces around him should get better. Jermaine Johnson coming off of injury, Will McDonald, like I said, full year. But it's that D tackle 2 spot that I'm really concerned about with his defense as a whole. And then moving to the secondary, it's like, okay, so they want to run similar to what they ran in Detroit, cover 3, cover 1, kind of single high guys. They have a roaming strong safety who can play down in the nickel and then also come back and they can run some more deep cover stuff if they want to, but they want to run cover 1 or some cover 3 that could turn into man down the field more so. And they bring in a guy like A.Z. Thomas who runs that system well, so I think he should get some run early on, especially even though he didn't test the greatest. I'm just not the biggest fan of Brandon Stevens, especially after his rough season last year in Baltimore. I'm obviously Sauce, even though he didn't replicate his rookie season, is still one of the best corners in the league. He can run any system you want. So just telling him to go out there and be an athlete and erase the number 1 receiver, he'll love to hear that. And then you can just have to figure out who's going to be that number 2 corner. I wish they would have kept DJ Reed, but I think with the upside of A.Z. Thomas, it's going to be better for them specifically. So their secondary is a little weird for me. Their safety room, if anything, was just like a lateral move. I haven't been plussed about their safeties and who knows how long. I think Andre Sisco is a free safety. He's been a starter in the past. He's gonna be competent for them back there. Tony Adams as well. I'm not super worried about it, but I also don't think that's like a positive for the team. So their defense has a ton of talent. And they have a ton of talent that's going to work towards the scheme they're running with. The 2 linebackers they have, which are phenomenal. They're going to play a lot in this defense. Quinn Williams now being in an even front instead of some odd front looks as well will allow him to have some pressure taken off of him with some of those guys returning from injury. And then you have A.Z. Thomas at corner and then some decent safeties. But there are 1 or 2 spots on that roster where I have major question marks, whether it is if A.Z. Thomas isn't the secondary corner and it's Brandon Stevens, who DT2 is going to be. If they run a 3rd linebacker, who's that going to be? If they run a 3rd safety, who's that going to be? There's pieces from that defense they ran in Detroit, Aaron Glenn ran, that he likes to run and didn't get away from it no matter what in Detroit, that I don't know if they have the bodies there, at least for this season, to run it as effectively as you might think they'd be able to with how much plus talent they have.
So I'm looking at the Jets depth chart. Their 2nd string defensive backfield is a group of my guys. So they have Jalen Simpson, Malachi Moore, Quantez Stiggers, and A.Z. Thomas on their 2nd string. Right? All those guys are either rookies or second-year players. So, Parker, what did you have on Jalen Simpson? I believe he was an undersized but highly athletic safety, right?
Yeah, no, Jalen Simpson's a guy that checks none of the boxes that I love and my guy safeties, but I definitely saw the ceiling too. And pairing him with a guy like Malachi Moore, and that's what I was going to jump into anyway. Was I think, all of my questions with this defense are in the front 7, but I feel so good about the back end of it with the youth that they have in there and the upside. Like I said, Jalen Simpson, a very athletic, rangy safety that you can just put back there and just kind of let roam around. You got a guy, Malachi Moore, that can thump, but can also get back there and he can hang with some deeper routes. I think A.Z. Thomas is a great, partner for Sauce over the long term. I think they play a lot more similar than people think right off the bat. They're both long. They're both athletic. I'm really excited to see how that duo looks, but I was also a big Azaria Thomas truther, so we'll see how that goes for me. But I'm pumped about the back end of this defense. And I feel like if they are able to generate some pressure with guys who I liked when they were coming out, and Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald, even though they're a little more, situational specific, I think Quentin Williams is a great piece to have. Just, like Owen said, you need to find Quentin Williams a running mate if you're not going to have top level talent on the edge, because right now your defensive line is really just one guy and some rotational guys on the perimeter. You got to find some ways to not only just create pressure, but just win one-on-ones and be able to, get to every defense is trying to work towards being able to rush with 4, right? And the Jets are so far away from that right now. And I just think if they can let this back end kind of settle in and really focus on this front 7 the next couple of years, they could have quite the defense once again here in just a couple seasons.
Yeah. So on my simulator, the summer is actually I have some fun because I get to decide the draft order, right? Nobody's played a game. So I have the Jets picking first. And this might be similar to the Madden curse, everybody, because last year at this time I had the Titans picking first. I just usually look at like the 10 worst quarterback situations in the league, and I rack and stack them in the top 10 or finish drafting in the top 10. The Jets have to play the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Patriots. And I don't see them getting a win in the division. Right? So I see them easily being fourth, and then out of, let's say, the other 9 teams that I had decided to pick in the top 10, I just said the Jets look like, for as optimistic as we're saying, I don't see, similar to what Parker said, without the muscle in the front four of the defense, it doesn't matter how good the back end is.
You're gonna. I mean, they're definitely a couple seasons away from being, able to be considered competitive, but I don't think they're that many pieces away. And I think it's all about. I have a lot of faith in Aaron Glenn from a defensive perspective. I'm very interested to see how this offense looks in year one. If they're able to, like I've said, if they can stretch some defenses and create green space and create easy throws, that's where this offense is going to succeed. But this defense, I feel like, is really just missing some investment on that front seven. That can happen very quickly.
Yeah,
if the Jets get pick 1 and don't take TJ Parker, I just they're hopeless. They're hopeless.
Cade Klubnik, right?
Oh, geez.
No, it's going to be Peter Woods.
Peter Woods. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
So I think with their front seven specifically, especially like, okay, luckily for me, the Jets like to draft players I don't like outside of Azariah Thomas and Quintez Stiggers. I didn't like Will McDonald coming out that much. I thought he surpassed what I thought he could be. But at this point, he's still like 230, 240 as an edge rusher. And if you're going to be running a lot more even front schemes, you're going to have to basically make him a designated pass rusher type player and have Michael Clemon be that early down player, who was a player I did like coming out of Texas A&M, but I also agreed that he would be like a lower end, like run stuffing edge guy. So you're going to be able to play off of that a bit more. Jermaine Johnson's coming off a major injury. I think it was an Achilles injury, I believe. So like he was good. When his half a season where he was trying to pick it up a bit at the end there, and then he popped it at the beginning of last season. So if he can get back on track, I could see it. But he's also, I think he's more of a secondary rusher type player. You don't want him to be your number one edge type guy. And I have, like I said, I don't think I have much of any faith in that D tackle spot opposite Quinnen Williams. So despite there being talent in that front four, I'm not a big fan of a lot of guys outside of Williams, specifically for this upcoming season. And I do like their linebackers. I think the Jets, I keep calling the Lions because I've compared them to them so much. But those linebackers are going to be a lot of work. And we saw last year the Lions worked in like 7 or 8 linebackers because there were so many injuries there, because they like those guys playing almost all the snaps, and it's a trigger downhill run game. I do think that they're going to be good against the run, but their pass rush is going to be lacking outside of maybe Quinnen Williams and Will McDonald. And then they're going to try to control the ball, run offense, keep the ball on their side, and then when they finally have to give it up to the other team, stop the run, get the ball back as quickly as possible. But against teams like the Bills, Dolphins, even though you have a good secondary, I just don't think they have the horses up front to complement that to the point where you're going to not be able to play complementary football. So I agree. I think they're a couple pieces away on that front seven, specifically along their D line, to really complete the whole puzzle. But they also have, I'm not a Justin Fields truther. I think they probably wouldn't, if they got the number one overall pick, it'd have to be like Arch Manning if he came out, or Cade Klubnik, like a quarterback that they can finally put some future stock into. I'm not the biggest Breece Hall guy, never was, and even after his injury, especially not. I do think he's been struggling to catch back up to where he was. He just hasn't looked the same. Braylon Allen is going to be their inside the ground pound guy, but they have pieces there that can work in the system they're going to run. It's going to be, can those pieces take the next step? Are they going to be able to return to what they were pre-injury for some of those guys who missed because of injury? And I just think they are lacking high-end talent in positions that they're going to want to lean on in the type of offense they're going to be running.
Do you think the Jets are only a quarterback away from contending for the playoffs? Either of you?
I gotta say no. I mean, like I said, the defensive front seven's a problem.
I think no, just a quarterback wait, and if like they traded for, I don't know, like
if can they from a draft standpoint, if we were to put Cam Ward on this team, just plop him in, no other changes.
They would need. I think what they need to do is next draft cycle, they need to invest in the ancillary pieces because they have Justin Fields on a 2-year contract. So they need to invest in D tackle number 2, Peter Woods, wink, wink, and nudge, nudge. Maybe another edge. It could be a number 1 guy like TJ Parker, like Parker was saying, or in maybe even another corner that could be like if you're not in love with Azariah Thomas after year 1, you could definitely maybe a shutdown safety. Like I think Caleb Downs is the guy who's top takeaway here. Also, we kind of glossed over, but their wide receiver depth, as Steve was saying, isn't the best. Like they have Garrett Wilson, but then it's Malachi Corley, who's unproven, Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, who like you love as a wide receiver 4 or like a 3B, but you're not loving them as your go-to wide receiver 2. There's a ton of pieces where they can add talent. And then after they do that, you can maybe ask me this question. I'd be like, sure. I think if they added a quarterback, they'd be good. But I think they're 2 draft cycles away from being that team that if they added a young quarterback, they could be a danger to the rest of the division.
So according to the Jim Wicken's theory of building a team, if you're a new head coach, you have to get a quarterback within your first 2 drafts. So even if Fields is on a 2-year deal, 2026 is the year of the quarterback for the Jets. I can't think of too many coaches that did not draft a quarterback in their first 2 years with the team that did well. Right? Like the quarterback is kind of married to the head coach.
Yeah, I agree with that philosophy for sure. Right. And I even was talking with Drew the other night about how it's a shame that Mike McDaniel's career is tied to Tua Tagovailoa, where Mike McDaniel and maybe moving some pieces around and being in a different structure. Maybe, if you give him the Chargers talent pool or even a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, like what could he have done with them? But if you get rid of Tua to try and get Mike McDaniel a better quarterback, then you're going to lose Mike McDaniel too. So it's really just waiting for both of them to be out of town when realistically Mike McDaniel could probably do a lot with a different quarterback situation, but that's just not how the world works for some reason.
So, and I followed that Parker when I drafted my shadow team. I picked up Jalen Milroe. And the Seattle got him, what is it, Mike McDonald?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So Mike McDonald drafted a quarterback in his second year as a coach. Right.
So it doesn't matter where in the draft for you, Jim. It's just if they have to take a quarterback by year 2.
You have to take him, and generally speaking, when you take him, he should be your guy. That doesn't mean he has to start immediately, but you have to have a plan at quarterback. And just if you're a new head coach, if you come in without a plan at quarterback, you're not going to be a head coach for very long.
Well, if you're in this situation, if you're Aaron Glenn, you're like, I have 26-year-old Justin Fields. I'm going to build up this roster. We'll see if he went 4-2 his starts as a Steelers quarterback. Maybe we can pull a little bit out of here. We got this new kind of younger guru type offensive coordinator coming into our roster. He's basically Ben Johnson 2.0. Everyone keeps talking about him over Detroit, so let's bring him in. We have this guy who has gobs of potential, who's still like just barely past like draftable age because he came out so young. That okay, is that not our first swing at quarterback there? We have him on a multi-year deal, and then now we can spend this past draft class getting Armand Membu, getting some pieces in the secondary, and build up some of those pieces. And then this upcoming draft, grab a D tackle, grab a wide receiver, grab a safety, be able to build up all those other pieces. And then by year 2, you're like, all right, well, Justin Fields is crap. we're still not like we're competitive, but we're not getting over the hump because we can't win games with this quarterback. And then the next following season, maybe Arch Manning doesn't come out that year for the draft class, or you have whoever else comes up in the meantime. That's where you take your shot, because you've also seen teams that took over and wanted to get their quarterback, but they had to wait till the time was right because they can sell their coach or not a coach, their owner on, okay, we have this assessment of our roster right now. This was a bad team last year. We can come in, we'll bring our guys in at first. If we don't win year one, that just means we need to bring more guys in. Bringing a quarterback in isn't going to fix this.
So I think the most important thing year one is to establish a culture. It doesn't matter what the Jets' win-loss record is. It really doesn't. Aaron Glenn has to establish the culture that he wants. You would then draft a QB to come into the culture that you've created. That's my theory. And I could point to a lot of different situations, like even Tennessee. Callahan was in his second year as a coach. And because the scouting cycle is not the same as the coach hiring cycle, right? The scouting cycle is May to April, but the coaching cycle is January through December. So when you're a new head coach, you're actually 4 months behind in the scouting cycle, right? Like, so you have to, it's maybe better to sync. So the team building happens in the first draft. So I'm not suggesting that the Jets could only draft a quarterback and be okay. This is going to be a heck of a defensive line draft. It's based on what I've seen with the boards that have been shared with me for summer scouting. I'm really curious to see how people triage the wide receivers. Like, is the day two group really that good? And then the second thing is, are we really talking about 110 defensive linemen with a draftable grade between tackle and edge? Is it really like that? So those are the two things I'm looking forward to. But that's another topic for another podcast. Parker, do you want to let the fine audience know about you and all of your shadow teams?
Yeah. I'm the shadow team, what's the word? Preacher, the shadow team preacher, trying to get everybody involved.
Evangelist. There we
Jim,
go.
yeah, there you go. Jim just gave my team the kiss of death because I didn't take a legitimate swing on quarterback until year 3. So I might as well just sink the ship already. It's over. It's done. It's done for. It's done for. I'm getting fired here real soon. Don't worry. But yeah, no, you can follow me on X or Twitter, whatever, at ParkerBlake60. I post all my shadow team stuff there, my draft takes, my random thoughts about food, anything that I do article wise goes on there. Just go follow me. I post everything there. I just kicked my YouTube channel off again for this cycle this week. So go find me there. If I remember what it's called, I believe it's Coach Blake's Breakdowns on YouTube. Dropped a couple of just shadow team recap episodes this week, talking about the draft hauls and what I'm looking forward to on this upcoming season. And then we're getting into prospects starting next week. But yeah, and then obviously you can find me here on the Draft Professors whenever Jim is, willing to put himself through having me on another episode.
Oh, you'll always be able to come on another episode. Always. You want to let everybody know about Weekly Huddle and all of your other content?
Yeah, of course. So just first off, thank you, Jim, for having me on here. As always, it's a pleasure. I'm here with Jim every Monday and Wednesday leading up to the start of the season, where we're talking on Mondays, going over whatever schools we want to touch on for that week. This past weekend was Virginia Tech. This upcoming week is going to be Michigan State. And then after that, we have a plan for episode for the MAC as an entire conference. So you can look forward to that as someone who worked for a MAC team in the scouting department and then is just a fan of a MAC team specifically is going to be something I'm very interested in. I have a long list of like 20 players I sent into our group chat to be able to that I'm watching, getting preparation for that. So that's really exciting. And then on Wednesdays, obviously, we do the schemes and the player fits for specific teams. But when the fall comes around, me and Newt will be doing our full D-tackle and edge breakdowns every week. We'll be doing 8 player profiles, scouting players as the season goes on, and just giving you our thoughts, opinions as we did this past season with our D-tackle and your offensive line ranking. So look forward to that. And speaking of Newt, I have him. He's over at the Weekly Huddle YouTube channel where I post a lot of my stuff, where he is doing his summer scouting series for me, where this week he's going to be posting out his top 10 tight ends. So far we've done quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. I have my own personal stuff I'm going to be doing there when it comes to breaking down some film on players, both in the current draft class and past draft classes, try to see where we missed or hit on players in those past years. And then also I'm going to be doing a playoff predictors and having Bill Sparks come on. And we're going to be doing our first ever 2026 draft, mock draft there. So that'll be coming out soon as well. So over at the Weekly Huddle on YouTube, you can catch me there, at Twitter at Weekly Huddle. I post a ton of my opinions there. You can get all the updates from my YouTube channel there as well. And like I said, here on the Draft Professor, Mondays and Wednesdays. So I have a ton of content going out, and you can catch me if you're not tired of hearing me talk about football, you can catch me on all those different places.
So, and I checked out Newt's wide receiver episode on the Weekly Huddle. Literally, that was my warm up for this podcast because, I can't get enough of this either. So you can follow the channel right there at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It is the same on YouTube as it is on X, and now you can catch Mrs. R Relevant on Spotify. So if you want to hear the audio of this, you can put it on Spotify and listen to it on your way to work. So want to thank everybody that pointed out, here's how you add it to Spotify. But similar to what Owen said, we have daily draft content. So Draft Professor is daily draft content. We will have a podcast every day on the draft from now until April. Mondays and Tuesdays, we're breaking down specific universities. So Monday is Michigan State. Tuesday, I believe, is South Carolina. I think Parker might be on that Tuesday group as we start to get our podcast lineup set. Wednesdays and Thursdays, we're doing scheme fit. So today was the Bengals and the Jets. The next week would be the Patriots. And I guess we've got to go out west and do Denver. So Patriots and Denver next week. And then Fridays, we break down quarterbacks. So that's Durst, Bill, Anthony, and whoever wants to guest appear, breaking down 5 quarterbacks at a time. And we are repeating this through the summer until we run out of quarterbacks and until we run out of football teams. And then we got to come up with some other sequence to keep us busy in the month of August. But I know what that is, but you'll just have to keep tuning in before I tell you. That's what's known as a tease. I learned that from Owen. Cool. But for Parker, Owen, myself, for the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thanks for watching tonight, everybody, and we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.